You know what it is. That's right. It's time to talk money with your money nerd and financial coach. Now, tighten those purse strings and open those ears. It's the Money Talk with Tiff podcast.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of Tiffany's Take, where I answer your many questions right here on the podcast. So if you want your question answered, go to www.moneytalkwitht/ask Tiffany, and I'll be more than happy to answer. Don't forget also, guys, to like, subscribe, share this podcast, and rate, because it really helps us find more people that want to listen to us like you. So why not share the love? All right, so that's enough of that. So let's get into what I want to talk about today, and that's holiday spending. So I've been getting quite a few questions about some tips on how to make sure that, holiday spending doesn't get out of control, because 'tis the season and I've been there before, y'all. It is no fun when you blow your holiday spending budget, because the first of the year, you're on your new year, new me, I want to do good with my money. And then you're playing from a deficit. So we don't want that to happen to you this year. And I don't want it to happen to me this year. So let's talk about some tips. So first and foremost, talking about a budget. Okay. So y'all know I love budgeting. Budgeting is one of my favorite things to do. When you're thinking about the holidays, first and foremost, it happens every single year, y'all. And you might be thinking, well, duh, Tiffany. But I say that because that makes it really easy to budget for it. And you can actually budget for it all year long. So that way, at the end of the year in November and December, you're not scrambling around trying to figure out where this money is coming from or putting it on credit cards. So first and foremost, go ahead and build in your holiday spending into your budget that you use all year. That helps, because let me just throw out some numbers, and let me get my calculator too, because that's a misconception that people that are good with money are good with numbers. I am not, unless I have my calculator. So follow along with me. Let's say, for instance, you want to spend $500 for the holidays, getting gifts for everyone. If you start in November, that means you have $250 a month you need to come up with. And that's if you're looking at November 1st and December 1st. Okay. So $250. Now, if you spread that out over 12 months, we have $41, and let's just round it to 67 cents. So instead of trying to scramble around and figure out where $250 is going to come from your budget, you can just budget $42, let's say, every month out the year. And by the time December rolls around, you'll be able to have your $500 for spending. So that's one hack. And I'm doing air quotes because, guys, it's something that most people don't think about, but it's so obvious when you start thinking about it, right? So that's my first tip, is to stick your holiday spending in your budget all year long. So if it's too late for this year, which I get it, we are already in November. If it's too late, then go ahead and start for next year. Okay. Now, another budget I like to have for the holidays is how much I'm going to spend. So mind you, I said, let's say you have a $500 holiday budget, because this is where budget comes in again. Make sure you have an amount that you want to spend overall. Then you can plug in the people, plug in the gifts, things like that, and not have to worry about going overboard. So I like to pick a number. And then once I have that number, which is tip number 2, prioritize your gift list. So write down everyone that you plan to buy gifts for, and then prioritize them. And, definitely consider spending more on close family and friends, and then less on acquaintances. But having that overall arching number and then prioritizing a gift list can definitely help you make your dollars stretch and make sure that nobody's missed. Next, be sure to take advantage of the sales and discounts. Now, I will say caveat here. You might be thinking, oh, I already do Black Friday, or I don't want to go out for Black Friday. Oh, Cyber Monday, blah, blah, blah. With those types of sales, usually they're just putting stuff on sale, and I'm doing air quotes with the sale, because a lot of times it's stuff that hasn't moved all year for the retailer, and they bump up the price leading up, and then they put it on quote unquote sale. Now, if it's something that you've been eyeing for a while and you're like, oh, this is a really good price, cool, go for it. But I will tell you, most of the time when it comes to Black Friday and Cyber Monday, that is the type of stuff you're going to get. Now, one thing that I have noticed is that sometimes if you are like right before Black Friday, like, I'll say within a month or so, you can find good sales on the stuff that you actually want, right? Because they're trying to do that last push on the good stuff. And so just look out, like starting now, actually, go ahead and look out and see if you can find anything that's on sale. Now, I will say since COVID, I don't know how things have changed, but I've usually been able to get really good deals starting like November 1st on some things. So just keep that top of mind. Number 4, consider homemade gifts. I remember one year I just made soap for everybody because I love making soap and everybody loves my soap. So I was like, you know what? Why am I making this hard? I made everyone some soap and everybody loved it and even wanted more. So think about homemade things that you can make or homemade things that you can do. I can tell you that year it went such a long way because people knew I spent time, I spent effort in putting this soap together. And so they appreciated it more than just buying some plastic thing that was made at a factory. So consider some homemade gifts that you might can give out. One thing that and this is going to my next tip, one thing that I've done and placed more emphasis on, especially since I would say 2019, we've been doing this, is planning experiences instead of gifts. So I love traveling and I like traveling with my kids. So creating those memories are more valuable than material possessions. I can tell you now, my kids still talk about our trip from 2019. They still talk about our trip from 2021 because I think we skipped 2020. They still talk about all of these things and they're like, where are we going this year? It kind of builds up that anticipation. So think about that instead of buying all these toys and things like that. I'd rather spend my Christmas budget on an experience. And that might be what we do this year as well. Or if you're not thinking about getting away, you can also plan a special outing or a stay-at-home movie night as a gift. Sometimes, and especially in this day and age, we get so busy with so much things going on in life that just spending quality time and uninterrupted quality time is a gift. It is a gift. And so don't overlook the small things that you could do as well. So if you do plan on getting some gifts, going to tip number 6, save on some wrapping paper, y'all. That fancy wrapping paper and the bags and all that stuff. Now, I will say, if you go to the dollar store, because that's what I do, I go to the dollar store and get all that jazz because buying it full price out of like the Targets and the Walmarts and things like that, it's just too much. So I go to the dollar store and I usually get my boxes and my paper and things like that. But if the dollar store is not your jam or you miss out because I tell you that stuff be going quick, consider cheaper alternatives like the brown parcel paper or even newspaper jazzed up with like some colorful ribbons or, just make it fancy. But I love the trees when it just has the brown parcel paper and all the gifts underneath. Like, I think that looks so nostalgic and cool. I need to try that one year if I lose out on the dollar store paper. So anyway, number 7, avoid impulse buys. Guys, this is why we do number 1 and number 2. Stick to your list and avoid the temptation to buy unnecessary items, no matter how good the deal seems. I remember one year, y'all, I went out for Black Friday. The only time I ever went. I was looking, didn't find anything of interest. I walked out with some headphones. That's it. And I didn't even need the headphones, but I was like, I done came out 2-3 o'clock in the morning. I'm leaving with something. That was an impulse buy. And so I could have just left those headphones and saved my money. But that's why I say stick to your list, because sometimes you might be looking around, especially on Cyber Monday and Amazon. You might be browsing around and you find something that you really didn't need, but you're like, oh, let me go ahead and throw this in the cart. Stick to your list and avoid that temptation. It can save you so much money. Now, I gave you a small example, but there are bigger examples out there. Let's say number 8, use credit wisely. If you do have to use your credit card, now, mind you, let's do this as a last case scenario, worst case scenario, or, if you're one of those that do the points hacking and things like that, cool. But either way, you still have to use it wisely because, like we said at the very beginning of the episode, you don't want to end up January 1st and you in a bunch of credit card debt because you just went crazy during the holidays. So avoid charging more to your card than you have to pay it off. So I don't want any of my listeners going out there and spending credit like it's income, because I tell people all the time that is not how you use credit as a tool. You never want to use credit as income because it really gets you into a hole. So use credit as a tool. Spend only what you have available if you're going to use the points hacking thing. Best case scenario, just avoid it altogether. But if you do, just make sure you use it wisely because you don't want to end up in that situation later on. And then remember the spirit of the season. I don't care what holiday you celebrate, be it Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, Christmas, something else, whatever. The holidays are about spending time with loved ones and showing them that you care. It's not about who spends the most money. And I'm looking at you, parents with shared custody now. You don't have to sit there and impress your kids. Matter of fact, I know with my kids, they care more about the time that's being spent versus the gifts that they give. Yeah, it's all fine and dandy if they're sitting under the tree and they have all these gifts and they're opening for days. But first of all, that will wear off because we all know by week 2, the toys are just sitting there. But also, what they care most about and what they remember is the time. Like if you're sitting on the floor and opening the gifts with them, or are you taking pictures and then going back and looking at those pictures? Like those are the moments that matter. So remember the spirit of the season and prioritize that versus the gifts. All right. So I hope those 9 tips help you with managing your holiday spending effectively. If you have a question that you want me to answer on the podcast, please go to www.moneytalkwitht.com/Ask Tiffany, and I'll be more than happy to answer for you. If you follow me on social media, and if you're not, go ahead and find me at Money Talk with T. You can do it now. But if you follow me on social media, you'll see that I am only a couple of hundred listens away from reaching my goal of 100,000 listens by the end of this year. So thank you all so much for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate you. And I hope that the podcast is super helpful in all of your financial endeavors. And if there's any way that I can provide you with more of what you love, let me know, because I would love to hear from you. Okay. I answer DMs, I answer emails, and yes, it is me on the other side. Okay. But thank you so much for listening to the podcast, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye.
Thank you for listening, joining, and being a part of the Money Talk with Tiff podcast this week. You can check Tiff out every Thursday for a new Money Talk podcast. But if you just can't wait until next week, you can listen to previous podcast episodes at moneytalkwitht.com or follow Tiff on all social media platforms at Money Talk with T. Until next time, spend wise by spending less than you make. A word to the money wise is always sufficient.